I call the Kitty Hawk Town Council to order this Monday, December 1st, 2014, at Kitty Hawk Town Hall. It is now 6 p.m. We have quite a few people. I'm glad to see you all out. We always like to hear from you. Thank you for coming and paying attention to your government. Will you join us in a moment of silence and Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next I'm going to call for approval of the agenda, and we're going to add 11C, which is a TASER grant, under new business. And the reason I'm doing that is because it was, normally that would be a consent agenda item, but it was not brought to us in time, so I want to explain what it is. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved. Second.
Do I hear, and I heard a second? Did I hear a second? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Opposed? Nobody. All right, next we have presentations and recognitions. The police department has a longevity promotion introduction of a new hire. Chief?
First off, I want to thank you for your time. Love to honor my employees any way I can and introduce them to you. Don't get to see them too much because they're always busy. That's the way I like it. But Brian Strickland is the second longest current serving employee with the town of Kitty Hawk. He's an admin sergeant at the police department behind Ms. Morris here. And he's been with the town now 20 years. He came as a police officer right out of college and basic law enforcement training from the western part of the state. Moved here to the Outer Banks and is started from PO1 and moved all the way through the ranks to administration sergeant. He is in charge of the records clerks, all the day-to-day operations with training, supplies, keeping up with all the records, which is quite a task in itself. He's also the regional director for the Governor Highway Safety Program, which we receive a grant from every year. One of the great things that I think Brian brings to the table is not only can he multitask very well, but he cares a lot about the community and the children. He gives seminars pretty much regularly about bullying, and he's been in eastern North Carolina to most. He does the Dare County schools every year, even Hatteras, and I think that's great. And he talks to, spends a lot of time with the kids after the seminars and helping them in any ways. And also parents call periodically and he assists them. It may not be a Kitty Hawk resident, it may be an Avon resident. And I think that's great. So Brian is a tremendous asset to this town, and also he has 2 children, great father and husband. Thank you all. Jeffrey Elke here. He's being promoted from police officer 2, police officer 3, which is the equivalent to a corporal. But we refer to it as a police officer 3. He's a U.S. Army veteran of the Iraqi War. He's a general law enforcement instructor. He's a TASER instructor. And he's also a field training officer instructor to our new hire, Mr. Simpson here, showing him the ropes of the Kitty Hawk way. And he's a very great asset. He has 2 small children, 2 girls, 6 and 2, and they reside over in Currituck. Very important. And this is the new bomb tech. This is the lowest man on the totem pole. Takes all packages that are suspicious. Chris is a graduate of, grew up and was raised down here. His father was a policeman. in Elizabeth City in the earlier years, and he felt a calling after being out and working in different settings. He's a graduate of First Flight High School, lives right here in Kitty Hawk Village. Glad to have him, great guy, and appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, fellas, for all the work that you do. We appreciate you coming on board to help us out here in Kitty Hawk. And thank you especially for all the work you do, not only in Kitty Hawk, but as Joel just said, throughout Dare County. That's important work, and especially with the kids. We all get that. Thank you all for what you do. All right. Next, we have the Comprehensive Transportation Plan. Uh-oh, what happened to you? Skiing accident?
Running accident.
Uh-oh.
All right, sorry, we've got the wrong date on this presentation. Good evening, my name is Carrie Morrow. I'm here to talk to you about the Dare County Comprehensive Transportation Plan that we recently completed. The objective of tonight's presentation would be just to give you an explanation of the process. I know you've probably heard some about it leading up to tonight, and let you know what we've done and what the next steps will be, and hopefully if we can get the CTP adopted tonight. To talk about who was involved in the plan. So DOT takes the lead, and we've worked closely with Albemarle Rural Planning Organization as well. And then we formed a steering committee. We had representation from the county as well as all the municipalities, as well as some interested citizens and some other agencies. So to go over briefly, what is a comprehensive transportation plan? It's a long-range multimodal plan for, in this case, for the entire county. It can be done for cities at times. And it's a conceptual plan. So we're looking at a 25 to 30-year horizon. So we're not looking at immediate needs. We're looking for long-range needs. The plan is not fiscally constrained. It's again, a broad conceptual plan just to identify future needs. There's no funding attached to any of the recommendations that come out of this plan. It's simply to identify, potential solutions for transportation issues. Again, it's developed cooperatively between NCDOT and the region and the local stakeholders. We've incorporated local land use plans, and there's a goal to take into account community goals and visions. And like I said, it's multimodal, so we're not looking just at highway. We're also looking at transit, bike and ped, and in this case, for Dare County, we looked at ferry and waterway. This slide shows a comparison of a CTP, and you may have heard before of the TIP, or the Transportation Improvement Program. Transportation Improvement Program is more an immediate need, set of projects that is fiscally constrained. So again, these are not fiscally constrained projects, but these hopefully would maybe plant the seed for projects down the line. This just shows kind of a typical CTP schedule, and, you know, we went through all these steps looking at the data for the current year. The base year for this plan is 2012. We analyzed and projected data to identify deficiencies. We developed different alternatives to address those deficiencies, and then we're recommending the plan that you have tonight. And when I refer to the plan, what you would really be adopting is just the maps, the set of maps that you have for each of the modes of transportation. That is what you would be adopting. There's also a report that goes with it that will be, it is actually complete in draft form, and I think you guys have had that also. But what you would be adopting is the set of maps. So the technical report is what I talked about, and then again, this would hopefully plant the seed for projects and corridor protection and programming down the line. Just so you guys kind of know what you're looking at, with the highway map, I'll go over the different facility types. So there's symbology that you can see in the legend. The kind of blue line represents freeway, and there are none recommended here in Dare County, but just to go over the definition, it's a high mobility, low access facility, 55 miles per hour or greater, complete control of access and no signals. Expressway, which we do have a recommendation for that on US 64. This is also a high mobility, but low to moderate access on those types of facilities. 45 to 60 miles per hour, limited or partial control of access. No traffic signals, and you'd have a cross section of a minimum of 4 lanes with a median, and connections would only be provided at interchanges or major cross street for major cross streets, and at-grade intersections for minor cross streets. The next level down is a boulevard, and this is like a red line on the highway map. Moderate mobility, low to moderate access, 30 to 55 miles per hour, limited partial or sometimes no control of access, and traffic signals on these facilities are allowed. A minimum of 2 lanes with a median, and at-grade intersections are allowed. And then finally, major and minor thoroughfares. These are moderate to low mobility and high access, 25 to 55 miles per hour, no control of access, and traffic signals, a minimum of 2 lanes, no median is necessarily on a minor or major thoroughfare, and primarily at-grade intersections on those streets. The first map that you have in front of you is the adoption map. This doesn't really give a lot of information, it's just gonna give the dates that all the adopting parties do adopt the plan. The second map is the highway map. So this is the large map, and as you can see there, you can't see a lot of detail, so we have some insets there. Inset A shows this area, and the big thing to point out here would be 158. So to talk a little bit about the recommendations for 158, this facility is projected to be over or near capacity by the year 2040. All the way from Currituck County to US 64. And as you know, it's the primary north-south connector through this area. And there's an identified safety issue. 18 sections of the road, as well as 14 intersections, have been identified as high crash locations. And it provides access to lots of businesses. So the recommendation that we've made is to recommend it as a 4-lane boulevard. And again, to remind you, the boulevard would be with a median, so 4 lanes with a median in between. This recommendation would likely reduce congestion. It's consistent with something called the Strategic Highway Corridor Vision Plan, which I know later on your agenda you have strategic transportation corridors. That's the old version of that, but it's currently in place since the strategic transportation corridors aren't adopted yet. And furthermore, in the documentation, you may have noticed that we recommended, as a steering committee, we recommended US 158 for further study in the form of a corridor study, and that would help us to kind of figure out what cross-sections are appropriate in what places, since we know it's not just a uniform facility. The next set of maps is for the transit mode, and so at the top here, we're showing a connector, it's a bus route. So all of the green lines that you're seeing on these maps represent bus routes, and that would be fixed route bus routes, which differ from the current on-demand bus service that you guys have now. So that, like I said, this slide shows the Duck and Southern Shores connector, which would go along NC 12. And then in insets A and B, we show, at the top of the slide, we show the loop services. So those would go along NC 12 and 158. And then in inset B, you can see it's pointed out that there's a connector to Roanoke Island as well. Also, on this map with insets A, B, and C, at the top of this slide, you'll see that there are a number of park and ride locations, and those are represented with a P inside a box. So these top two in inset B, those represent park and ride locations that are designed or intended to be used by private water transportation companies. So that would not be something operated by NCDOT. That would be just to facilitate that type of transportation if desired. The park and ride location at Whalebone Junction would be to serve beachgoers that are wanting to go over to Roanoke Island and leave their car on the other side. And then finally, at the bottom, the Hatteras Ferry Park and Ride, that one would be intended to serve passengers who are wanting to take passenger ferry. There currently is not any passenger ferry, but there is a study to possibly see how well that would work in the future. So we wanted to put that there to facilitate that transportation in the future. Here's a draft bicycle map. There are numerous bike and pedestrian recommendations in this plan. Probably too numerous to count, but just let me know if you have any questions on any of those. And we show insets for down on Hatteras as well. And then the pedestrian maps, very similar symbology. Most of the places where we have bike routes recommended, we also have pedestrian sidewalks recommended. And I'll point out that the yellow symbols, which are both on the bicycle and the pedestrian maps, they all show up on both maps because they're intended for both bike and pedestrian usage. So those multi-use trails are intended for both. Wherever you see green lines, those represent off-road trails. So again, that would be intended for both bike and ped, but they would be not along the side of a roadway necessarily. And to talk about what's next, well, this is an outdated presentation. So we've been to Duck and Southern Shores, as well as Dare County. We presented to Dare County. Duck did adopt on November 5th. Southern Shores didn't adopt it on November 5th, but they have subsequently adopted the plan. So we're here tonight. We go to Manio on Wednesday. And Nags Head, we've already presented to them, but they'll take a vote also on Wednesday. Hill Devil Hills will be next Monday, and then they're gonna take a vote at the Dare County Board of Commissioners meeting on the 15th. Then if all goes as planned, we'll proceed and go to Albemarle RPO for endorsement in January, and then we'll go to NCDOT for adoption by the Board of Transportation in February. It's my contact information, and at this point, I'm happy to take any questions you have.
I'm confused. you said that we were only adopting the maps tonight,
That's right.
but we have before us, or we thought we were adopting a comprehensive transportation plan. Is that coming later?
The plan in this case actually is the maps. The report is something that documents the plan and kind of clarifies some details. But legally, the set of maps is the term that we use for the plan, for the CTP. It is the maps. So that's all you would be adopting.
But if we adopt a resolution accepting a comprehensive transportation plan for Dare County, North Carolina,
That would be the
we're
set of maps.
adopting the maps.
That's right.
But the verbiage, the report itself is a part of that, no?
No, it's not. I know it's confusing, and we've gotten tripped up on this before, but you are only adopting the maps. The report is a technical report that accompanies the plan.
All right. Okay, so we still need to do the resolution, which we're going to do towards the end of the meeting because there are some comments that I know council has.
Okay.
And I know we're going to have a busy night, so I hate to hold you up. I think what's going to happen is it will be accepted. We'll adopt it under acceptance because there's a question about the bus plan,
Okay.
which several of us don't think will work. And then there was another part that I had brought up at an earlier time that was never adopted, and that had to do with flooding. And what I was told was you folks think horizontally and you don't think vertically. So in a 25-year plan, there's no provision to really fix a flooding like we have from 711 to the Kill Devil Hills line on 158. So that'll be things that we put into the minutes
Okay.
to address it.
Okay.
Beyond that, I think it will be accepted if you don't want to stay. And I'm offering you that option.
I'm fine with either way. If you guys want me to address any of your questions, I'm happy to stay.
Can we just move it up? Can we change
Well, let's
the
do-
agenda?
everybody
to
all right
just
with that?
move it up?
All right,
I'm
let's,
fine.
all right. We're
Because-
now on, go ahead, we're on 11A.
Okay. Do you want me to go ahead on this?
Please.
I was a part of the Dare County Transportation Task Force, and we fooled around for 2 years with a bus plan. And the result, pretty much, of what all of that effort encompassed was that buses for Dare County were it would not be self-sustaining. There were so many obstacles in terms of bus stops. Where do you put bus maintenance facilities? There was an understanding that these buses would not do anything to help with traffic congestion. And during that time, we actually ran a little pilot program for several weeks. And in 1 week, for instance, there was a total of 3 people that used the van service. And it was well publicized. There were articles in the newspaper about it. It was on the radio. It was transmitted to all of the employees, the kids that come from foreign countries. And we went, in the end of that time, to the Dare County Commissioners. And with budget priorities, the commissioners decided that this was not something that would be funded, like, for the next step. So I personally am not really in favor of adopting a plan that is still pushing for this bus system, that we have all kinds of documentation showing that maybe there's a better use for the transportation funds than for a Dare County public transportation.
I understand that. guess a couple things to keep in mind is, you know, we're not necessarily pushing for it, but we're including it as a possibility, because again, this is a 25 to 30-year plan, so a pilot program that didn't work a few years ago may work in 25 to 30 years. So we just want to keep that as a possibility, and we actually did consult with that plan to get these recommendations, and we looked at that for the routes, and worked with Don Cabana from Dare County Transportation Services.
When you go to Kill Devil Hills, one of the commissioners in Kill Devil Hills was also on that transportation task force. And I remember when we went to one of the comment sections for the Dare County transportation plans, both of us, and I know I wrote down a lot of comments on that, and she also talked about the price that would be required per ride. I think during that time, there was a decision that anything on the beach road was just infeasible. There was there were all kinds of issues about bus stops requiring traffic lights, and the spacing of traffic lights, as you know, are pretty far apart, and putting additional traffic lights on 158, which is going to be a boulevard in your plan, which could have traffic lights, is probably not a, you know, really good idea either. I guess what I'm concerned about is so many things get left in a plan as a possibility, and then resources get applied to those things, where resources could be applied perhaps to better road improvements, and everything's a trade-off, and you say this is not funding constrained, but as long as it stays in there, there's an expectation that it's something that is desirable.
Can I touch on, this might clarify, hopefully it'll clarify, not confuse you more. The DOT doesn't implement this plan. All those projects in there will not be built unless the town comes to the RPO and says, we want to put this in the DOT division, Division 1 DOT, and says, we want to put this in for funding. So no one's going to come and tell you that you have to do this. Again, you know, I understand your concerns, but there's no one's coming in, DOT is not going to come in and say, this isn't your plan, you have to do it. Now that bus service as well, I think at one point they were thinking it could be a private type of bus service too, so that really wouldn't have anything to do with NCDOT. But I just want to let you know that the plan isn't something that DOT is going to come in and say, okay, you've got this in here, now you have to do it. A lot of the projects, it's very kind of high view of the project. You're still looking at doing design work, all that stuff to them. So even the 158 project, we wouldn't even know what that would look like until, you know, it got funded to be actually doing the study as well.
And that is important to shoot, that's a good point, that there would be, keeping it in the plan opens the possibility for it to ever happen as a possibility, but if it did get programmed, there would be many more opportunities to give input on design type things, which are the current concerns you have, which are valid concerns. Right now, we don't look at design, so that's just something we don't factor in at this point.
Well, to get down to the specifics, we did make some changes to the resolution and change the words adopt to accept.
Okay.
And there was one other change where in the resolution itself, it said the plan should be accepted as a guide in the development of a transportation system. And we would like that, and we changed that to the plan is accepted. And this is something that council can, you know, is here, we can discuss that and see whether we want to make that change. But the plan is accepted as a guide and not anything more than that.
Okay.
The other change, I'd just like to change the recommended to the North Carolina Department of Transportation for its subsequent adoption. We would like to change that to its subsequent action, because our understanding is that the next step is it will go to the RPO.
For
And,
enforcement.
Right, so our acceptance is going to be considered by the county commissioners, who I understand have noted that they want to see the actions of the towns before proceeding. I understand the next step is forwarding the plan to the RPO, not adoption by the state. I don't support adoption of a plan that includes bus trolley for Dare County. The Dare County Transportation Task Force spent 2 years dealing with that issue and found that the project was costly, not self-sustaining, and would not relieve traffic congestion, and could potentially make it worse. The county commissioners voted not to fund continued action for that project. So that's the rationale for the changes that we would like to make.
Okay. One thing I was gonna say, can you repeat the part about the RPO?
Would you like me to read the resolution?
I wouldn't mind that, yeah.
Okay. So whereas Dare County Albemarle Rural Planning Organization and the Transportation Planning Branch, North Carolina Department of Transportation, have actively worked to develop a comprehensive transportation plan for Dare County, North Carolina, and whereas the county and the Department of Transportation are directed by North Carolina General Statutes 136-66.2 to reach an agreement for a transportation system that will serve present and anticipated volumes of traffic in the county, and whereas it is recognized that the proper movement of traffic within and through Dare County is a highly desirable element of the comprehensive plan for the orderly growth and development of the county, and whereas after full study of the plan and providing an opportunity for public comments, the Kitty Hawk Town Council believes it to be in the best interest of the county to accept a plan pursuant to General Statutes 136-66.2. Now therefore be it resolved that the Kitty Hawk Town Council hereby accepts the Dare County Comprehensive Transportation Plan dated June 23rd, 2011, and I hope that date is still relevant.
No, that's not,
That's what
that
we
day.
had to deal with here
Was
before we
that
got
date
these
provided
maps.
to you?
Well, yeah, that's what was
I
provided.
think that we provided a template, so it's possible that this is the date from the template, but this.
So we'll have to, we'll have to
Right.
correct that date. That is within that is within its planning jurisdiction. The plan and the change we make is accepted as a guide in the development of the transportation system in Dare County, and the same is hereby recommended to the North Carolina Department of Transportation for its subsequent action. And that's the resolution.
Well, that's the
That's
resolution as you're
as
proposing.
revised, and the only proposal I'm making, and what you have in your packet, is
Right.
changing should be to is. In other words, you know, we're not telling ourselves what we should be doing. This is what we are doing. And then the last word of that sentence, adoption, is changed to action, because the next part of this system here is to go for, I guess, first to the county commissioners and then to the RPO. So it's not an immediate adoption at that point.
One thing I wanted to also add, which Angela just reminded me, as you're making your decision, and I think that this language is fine as far as I know. I'm not familiar with, you know, whether or not adopted or accepted is, I'm not sure what the difference is legally. But if that's, you know, your wish to do, then that's fine. But I just wanted to point out that you would be adopting, so as the town of Kitty Hawk, you guys would be adopting the portion of the plan that's within Kitty Hawk.
Within Kitty Hawk.
So, okay, just want to make sure.
All right, M's had a lot to say.
Yeah.
She's into this, especially the bus route. Anyone else have anything to say?
I'm fine.
Craig?
I agree with what she's saying when it's appropriate. I'd just like to point out some corrections that need to be made.
It's appropriate now because we're about to make a motion here.
A number of times in this correspondence and in the resolution, 168 is incorrectly identified as a U.S. highway. From somebody who's traveled that road many times over the years, that is an NC highway, a North Carolina highway.
Is this in the report?
168. Well, I've got it in my resolution and correspondence right in front of me right now. 168 is an NC highway.
Yeah, I don't think that's in this resolution.
It's in the resolution.
11B.
Okay, that's the recommended motion where it shows up, and we'll correct that.
We'll make our correction for that.
But we do have to change that date. What is the correct date of the plan?
I think it would be whatever date is on the maps. I don't, you, they're gonna ask me whatever date is on the bottom of that.
October 30, 2014.
October 30th. So it's October 30th, 2014.
Not yet.
Can I ask one more thing real quick?
Yes.
When we're talking about the documentation that goes with the plan, we're still, after this new office, we're still going to do that and looking at it and doing some minor changes to it as well. So, I know John Stockton brought up a concern, from one thing, we did it out, we just couldn't do it before we started presenting to you.
Okay,
Still, that documentation, part, we're still kind of in draft.
okay. I think we're giving Lynn a lot to do. Jeff, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't.
All right. Anybody else have any further comments? All right. Em,
Okay.
I'm going to ask you to make the motion since you've got a lot on the line.
I move approval of the resolution accepting, well, should I say the maps?
The CTP, the Comprehensive Transportation Plan.
Okay, accepting the comprehensive transportation plan. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Hold on one second. I move approval of the resolution accepting the comprehensive transportation plan for Dare County and further authorize the mayor to sign and the town clerk to attest said resolution as modified.
All right. Do I hear a second? Second. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and I'm going to recommend that since we're doing this, we have one more that deals with this subject matter, and it's 11B, and it has to do with the resolution supporting US 158 and NC 168 and the Mid-Currituck Bridge. And basically, the resolution, in summary, is supporting trying to get upgrades to 158, 168, and get the Mid-Currituck Bridge back on track, is what it amounts to. So, do I hear a motion to approve this
Make a
resolution?
motion. I move to approve the resolution in support of including US 158, US 168, and the Mid-County Bridge on the Strategic Transportation Corridors Network map. I further authorize the mayor to sign and the town clerk to assess this resolution.
Okay, that 168 is NC 168.
Yeah, NC, I'm sorry,
Okay,
for the
you amend
changes.
that?
Amended.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. That takes care of you folks, I think, for tonight. Thank you. All right. Sorry, folks, but that needed to be said. That'll be on the record. Now we have beach nourishment. This is something that is new. It has to do with beach nourishment. And I decided, or asked to have this put on the agenda so that as we get questions concerning beach nourishment and what you can expect from it, we're going to try to answer them. And so it's a frequently asked question type thing. I've had some questions asked of me that are not always picked up on the news or our broadcast. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the question, is the 60-foot beach berm width a finished construction width? And the answer is no. The 60-foot beach berm width is the projected width remaining after 5 years. The beginning width will be in excess of 100 feet immediately after construction. Next question, why isn't the question of whether the community wants beach nourishment being put to a vote? The answer is, the question is being put to the vote of every property owner in the town of Kitty Hawk via the municipal district hearing process. Property owners will be directly responsible for paying the tax and need to be fairly represented. Voting via registered voting process would leave out multiple non-resident property owners. Question: where on the beach will sand filling start? Answer: generally east of beachfront homes. That may mean at the base of pilings for some extreme exposed homes. Question: why did the cost to nourish Kitty Hawk Beach rise so much higher than originally predicted? Answer: the slope of Kitty Hawk Beach is very steep with little to no natural berm left in numerous areas. That also means deeper water to fill close to the existing surf line in order to get the projected 6-foot berm height further out to seaward. In order to get any reasonable benefit from nourishment, more sand is required, which translates to more cost. Question: what will be my complete tax rate under each proposed municipal service district? The answer: the current town-wide tax rate is 32 cents per $100 of property valuation. Council intends to remove 2 cents of that to reduce the base rate to 30 cents. This means that MSD, or Municipal Service District A, will pay 30 cents base rate plus 15 cents for a total tax rate of 45 cents per $100 property valuation. Municipal Service District B will pay 30 cents base rate plus 4 cents for a total tax rate of 34 cents per $100 property valuation. As we get questions at each council meeting, we'll try to answer them. Some of these questions that I answered tonight will be in the minutes of the minutes we're about to approve tonight, and you'll probably see some repeating here. Lynn does an excellent job of capturing what goes on here in a council meeting, and the pertinent information may be repeated, but we want to make sure that we network as much of that out as we possibly can. We have a good crowd tonight. Please pass that along as best you can, and for those folks that are watching, pay attention to the minutes, and we'll try to make sure you get all that you need to know. All right, next we have time set aside for public comment, and I realize we have a couple of public hearings. And the difference between public comment and public hearing, we generally ask you to confine your comments to 3 minutes during public comment. In public hearing, we'll allow 5 minutes. Do we have any?
Yes. Rita Phyllis. Good evening. It's been a while since I've been to one of these. Hope everyone's well. My husband is currently recovering from 6 broken ribs on his left side due to a work-related accident. Last Tuesday, I was taking him to the urgent care. We thought that he had picked up a little pneumonia, which can happen, and his breathing had gotten much worse. While I was on the way there, he started gasping, and I thought he was going to die. So I pulled straight into the fire department. Sorry. He's my husband, I love him. Pulled into the fire department, went in and yelled for help. 3 men, I swear, just materialized. And immediately started helping him. Chief Spider pulled up. Ben Alexander arrived. A couple of police officers arrived. An ambulance arrived. It was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. He was eventually transported to Outer Banks Hospital, where he was treated for a pleural effusion of the left lung, which is doc speak for fluid in the lung. They actually removed 2 good-sized vials of blood from his left lung. He is now home and is supposed to make a full recovery. I just wanted to let you guys know how awesome the fire department is. Chief Spivey is an inspiration to everyone. These 3 young men were trainees. They were trainees. I can't even imagine how awesome, experienced guys would have been. These kids just jumped in, and they saved my husband's life. And I want y'all to be very, very proud of Lowell Spivey and all of the people who are associated with the Kitty Hawk Fire Department. Thank you.
Thank you. It just points up that fire is not the only thing that those folks do. They do a lot of different things. Lynn, do we have anyone else?
No one else signed up.
Does anyone else want to speak at this public comment period?
I think I would, Mr. Mayor. I had signed up for the public hearing, but I think it's appropriate for me to make my comments now, if it's okay.
Certainly.
My name is Matthew Spencer. I'm a lawyer in Nags Head, and what I have to say is going to seem very insignificant compared to what we just heard. But my comments concern what I'll refer to in the shorthand as the Barefoot Bernie's rezoning. I represent the board of First Flight Ridge, the Homeowners Association board. I've been asked to speak up tonight simply to make the board aware, if you were not already, that there are private use restrictions on the residential lots in First Flight Ridge. They are restricted to residential use. The board has asked me to speak so the board would not be under any misunderstanding as to whether or not the intended use has been approved by the board. It has not. At present, the lot that Mr. Vlahos would like to convert to a commercial lot is restricted privately through restrictive covenants or deed restrictions to residential use. So I don't suggest that those private restrictions would prevent you from granting the rezoning that's been requested. I simply want you to be aware that at present, Mr. Vlahos' intended use conflicts with the restrictive covenants in the neighborhood. We are working with Mr. Vlahos through his attorney, Mr. Merrill, who it's been my great pleasure to work with, to try and work this out, but at present, we have not done so. So please keep that in mind. Give it what weight you think it deserves as you consider the matter further. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. All right, we'll deal with that when we get to that part of the public hearing. Anyone else wish to speak? Let the record show that no one else came forward. Next, we have consent agenda. I don't think it's taken us this long to get there for a long time. All right, do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Do I hear any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, and we don't have anything removed, so we're good to go. Now we go into public hearing. At first, we have a text amendment. It's an application to amend Section 42-445 of the code to allow veterinary hospitals and clinics. That's the one this one is for. I'm going to do these one at a time since we have an audience that I think probably has interest in at least one or more of these. Do I hear a motion to go into public hearing?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we are now in public hearing. Lynn, has anyone?
No, sir, I don't have anyone signed up for that one. But I do
All right.
have the other two.
Does anyone want to speak to this part of the public hearing concerning veterinary hospitals and clinics as a conditional use? Please come forward, state your name.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. My name is David Ryan with Creative Engineering Solutions. I was representing the applicant on this text amendment. And first off, I'd like to go ahead and thank staff for working with us in crafting this language. I would just like to point out that this language within this amendment mirrors that within the existing BC1 district. So the language is almost identical, being very restrictive in nature, talking to the acoustics of the proposed facility, also the outdoor activities and what is not permitted, as well as the disposal of waste. So we wanted to ensure that in moving forward, that it was very similar in nature to what currently exists within the BC1 district. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have pertaining to this amendment.
Joe, do you have anything to add here? Let me get Joe, and then I'm going to ask the rest of the council if we have anything.
Thank you, Mayor Perry, members of council. Mr. Ryan actually touched on one of the, I guess, the basic tenets of the proposal. The fact that it does mirror the language that the town already has for the BC1 zoning district, which is a much more comprehensive district. There are obviously many more properties in that zoning district than the MS1 where it's being proposed. So I did want to point out that if we're looking at the MS1 district, the Emergency and Governmental Services, it was established back in 1996 for the purpose of allowing larger medical facilities and related medical and governmental uses. So it focuses on the provision of medical services to the community. And the only area where this district is presently located in Kitty Hawk is that area where we swing around the corner of Highway 158, including the ACOG Ground Visitor Center, now Centera Regional Medical Center, as well as a handful of properties to the south of that that are suitable or set up for potential future development in a manner consistent with that medical district. So this is there's only a handful of properties that would be directly impacted by this change. In other words, this wouldn't be something that would apply to many properties townwide, just that one area of town, should the change be considered by the council. And I guess for the record, I will note that at their meeting on October the 16th, the planning board did unanimously recommend approval of this text amendment to the council.
All right, thank you, Joe. The only question I have of you, Joe, is if we approve this, anywhere within that governmental district, and the question's going to come up later when we do the next one that talks about the lots, all right? Anywhere within that, a veterinary clinic could be established, regardless of lot 1, 2, 3, or whatever. Is that correct?
With a conditional use permit, and as long as it complies with all of the conditions of the district as proposed by the applicant.
Okay, all right, and you'll see why I asked that question later, because in looking at the maps, there's a reason. All right. Anyone else have a question of Joe or the gentleman?
Are we setting the conditions on this one, or just as allowing it as a conditional use? I mean, are we looking at the conditions that they just mentioned that are? I have only one question. The reason I'm asking this is it talks about no animals shall be kept or boarded outside the principal building, and there shall be no structures, runs, or pens used for boarding, holding, or restraining animals located upon the site outside of the principal building. My question is, how about boarding inside of the building?
As currently proposed, there is no plans for interior boarding, only in the cases of emergency where there is a surgery that may be performed where they may keep them. But that would be the only allowance that is currently on the board for this proposal.
And it could be
Is
more
this-
than one night.
Is this what this says?
Councilman Pruitt, We have this came up, if the council recalls, several years ago. You gave consideration to rezoning and subsequent development. There was a proposal of a boarding and grooming facility over off of Sibburn, West Sibburn Drive. And this same, very similar kind of discussion occurred. The thing, this is not specifically allowing that use. If you'll recall, as part of that, there was a text amendment that would allow pet boarding. So pet boarding is a separate, distinct use from a veterinary clinic. And that would be something, if somebody wanted to engage in that type of activity where they were boarding animals, they would have to come to the planning board and council to have that added, just as the applicant is doing tonight with this veterinary clinic proposal. They would have to add that as another use that would be permitted in the MS1 district. So the council would have an opportunity at that time to consider whether you felt that was appropriate. But as it stands with what you're considering tonight, it would not permit a boarding facility, whether it's indoor or outdoor, under this. Now, yeah, there's obviously a question within reason. We did, about half a dozen years ago, approve a veterinary clinic in one of our shopping centers on J. Taylor. And under that, it was, Mr. Taylor had brought up at the meeting where that was heard that, there's certainly going to be sporadic occasions where he might have an animal that needs to be, that is not in good shape, or it might need to stay overnight following a surgical procedure or something like that. But it would not be a boarding thing where somebody is dropping off their pet for a week while they go on vacation.
Right. Thank you, Joe. That clears it up.
I've got another question. In, it says a conditional use findings, that paragraph. Says, per the standards of section 4299B7, in order to approve this application, the town council must make findings that the proposed conditional uses, and this is what we're basically going to be doing tonight. And when you go down to D, in the second bullet, and the first and second, it says the accompanying text amendment for veterinary clinics is approved. All of the proposed uses will be compatible with the commercial district in which they are located. And this is not a commercial district. There's per stated policies in the town's adopted land use plan, the development of these businesses will be located on existing commercially zoned properties. So if we're passing this, it says that this is what we are, this is the findings that we are making, and I don't think that they're accurate. Aren't we doing, do we need to change that?
No, you're over on the conditional use application now.
Oh,
So
okay,
that's
I'm
not what
sorry, we're in the
considering at
zone,
the
we're in
moment.
the, yeah, we're in the zoning to put the,
Text.
yeah, to put the text amendment in. I'm sorry, I apologize.
We're in
Okay, we're in the zoning part of it.
the- Right.
Yeah, I got myself mixed up here. Okay. Okay with that.
Sure. While she's looking, Craig, do you have anything,
No, sir.
questions otherwise?
I was satisfied with the same question that Jeff had, and he answered my question.
Okay, and I happen to know, because I paid a goodly amount of money to one of these Kitty Hawk vet clinics, they will keep them more than one night if
Sure.
they've had surgery or a
Sure,
heart attack
yeah,
or whatever.
sure. Just-
And it's not cheap, so.
I just got one out.
But that's allowed. I mean,
Sure,
that's the kind of
sure.
boarding that's allowed.
sure.
They'll keep them as long as they need to.
Right.
Sure.
So, but we're not going to be approving a situation where they had wanted before, they wanted to groom and board both inside and outside, and certainly we're not allowing it outside. All right. You have any other questions?
No, none that are relevant.
All right.
Yeah.
Any further questions? All right. Do I hear a motion to go back into regular hearing?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. What does council want to do with this? You want to set on this for a month and make a decision next month? We often do that, give time to think about it.
I'll make a
I'm
motion.
ready to go.
You ready to go?
Round two.
All right, do I hear a motion to approve or disapprove? What you want?
Make a motion, I'll move to adopt the proposed text amendment to section 42-445 of the Kitty Hawk Town Code to allow veterinary hospitals and clinics as a conditional use, subject to the recommended conditions in the Emergency and Government Services MS1 zoning district. The town council finds that the proposed text amendment is consistent with the town's adopted CAMA land use plan and finds the amendment to be in the public interest by allowing a compatible use in the MS1 zoning district.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, it's passed. Now, next is a conditional use application to construct 3 buildings. Basically, 2 of them are medical offices and 1 the veterinary clinic at 5121, 5125, and 5129 Putter Lane. Do I hear a motion to go into public hearing?
So moved.
Hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're in public hearing. Joe, let's talk about this before I ask for folks to speak.
Mr. Mayor, I think they need to be sworn for this here.
For this one?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Some of these require the people that want to speak to be sworn. So if you want to be sworn, if you're planning to speak, please come up and Lynn will do the honors. If you want to speak, please don't be intimidated. Come on up. It's a rule. We didn't make it, so we have to follow it.
Okay. Mayor Perry, members of council, we have before you this evening is a proposal for a conditional use permit to construct 3 new buildings, each building 2,520 square feet in size. These buildings would contain medical offices and a veterinary clinic. Each of these buildings would be on its own separate lot. Total, if you're combining all of them, would be 7,560 square feet in size. And although each building will be on its separate lot, the development will share a common parking area. You have access that comes into the north, swings down to a driveway at the south. They'll share common drive aisles that run between the properties, as well as access onto Croatan Highway and Putter Lane. There is a proposed veterinary clinic that would go on the middle property that's designated as Lot 4 on your site plan and information. One thing I do want to point out, just for the record, and I do apologize, there's actually several property owners who we accidentally put in a panic about this with the planning board review. The addresses of these properties presently are 5121, 5125, and 5129 Putter Lane. These properties were, when originally developed as part of Seascape, as many of the residential properties along the highway do, they have double frontage on the highway, but they're oriented inward, and it was probably anticipated that they would gain access solely from Putter Lane as residential properties. However, with the subsequent rezoning to the MS1 district, and that made the properties more desirable for a commercial office type of use similar to what's permitted in that district. So the point I'm getting to is that these properties, should this development be approved for commercial development that's really oriented toward Croatan Highway, these properties would be reassigned new addresses of 5120, 5124, and 5128 North Croatan Highway. So I just wanted to be clear on that. The proposal would include, for the conditional use permit, in addition to that permit for veterinary hospital and clinic, our applicant is also seeking approval for licensed physicians, chiropractor, and optometrist offices as part of this conditional use permit. Those are some of the potential types of uses that could go in here. And rather than coming back to the council each time for a permit for that, they were seeking to get all of that array of medical-related uses approved up front as part of the development proposal, rather than, again, having to come back just to put a new use in an existing building and go through that 3-month process. Looking at the properties, these are properties located just to the south of Centera Regional Medical Center. There is if you're looking directly to the south, you do have one parcel that's presently developed with a medical office building. Then there is one vacant lot, and then you have this row of 3 parcels designated as lots 3, 4, and 5 in the original subdivision. The property across the street, you have properties that are zoned Beach Commercial 1, containing, there's a variety of different commercial uses located there across Croatan Highway. To the west, across Putter Lane, you have a stretch there. Some of the properties are across from some single-family residential properties. Some of it are up in an area that is across from the golf course, in this case, Seascape Golf Links. Going directly to the south, you have 2 parcels that are owned by the town of Kitty Hawk that are zoned Beach Residential 1, just directly to the south of this. Those are presently undeveloped. So you have undeveloped property to the north and south of these parcels. Together, each parcel is 100 feet in width along the highway in Putter Lane, 200 feet in depth. So each parcel is 20,000 square feet, total of 60,000 square feet, or a little over 1 1/3 acres in size. And I'll just highlight a few of the things. The staff report goes into detail on a variety of issues. I'll just touch on a few of the things that we felt were important, but I'd be glad to answer any questions the council would have about any of the things in the report. Looking at the lot coverage, whether we're looking at it as each individual lot or whether we're looking at it as a whole, the proposed development complies with the maximum lot coverage standard of 60%. If you add it all up, it's actually less than 50% total. Building setbacks also comply with all of the town standards. 20 setbacks of 20 feet on each side, 40 feet from the rear of the property, 110 feet from the front. One of the interesting discussions the planning board had relates to the access to this property, to it and within it. Some of the unique aspects of the property, as I mentioned, would be served by 2 20-foot wide ingress-egress drives off of Croatan Highway, one all the way up at the northern end of Lot 3, the northernmost lot, one near the southern end of Lot 5, that's the southernmost lot. And then the drive aisle runs through the property, connecting all 3 properties. Coming off the rear of the property in this area, you can see there is a 20-foot access drive that straddles the property boundary here between lots 4 and 5. that would connect this parcel back to Putter Lane to the rear there. The access drive as it comes through, in addition to providing access to all of the parking on the site, which is all located in the front on each side of the drive, that drive does also serve a purpose as a fire lane for that, meeting NC Fire Code standards for that. Following the planning board meeting, in addition to what's being shown here, the applicant did extend access easements connecting in this area here, connecting the end of the drive right here to the property to the south, as well as on the other end up to the property to the north. Now, those are not, just to be clear, those are not planned to be built at this point in time. The building would only include what's shown on the site plan. However, there would be easements there so that if and when those properties to the north and south develop, there would be an option, an opportunity there to have an internal connection where people are not being required to pull out onto the highway to go down to the next lot. They could do that internally and have a safer means of travel. Looking at the parking on site, doing the calculations, per the staff report, there are 41 parking spaces required to serve this development. Applicant's site plan shows a total of 44 spaces, so that does comply. 2 of those spaces would be required to be ADA handicap accessible. The applicant is actually showing 3 of those spaces, 1 in front of the entrance of each building, so they actually exceed that requirement. The other thing we're looking at when we're talking about traffic internal to the site would be a loading zone. Our ordinance does have some standards related to loading zones. However, it does make note that if the planning board, in reviewing it, determines a loading zone is not needed, then one does not have to be provided. In this case, the planning board did determine that a loading area is not needed to accommodate the proposed development. It was noted, there was information provided at the meeting that the types of delivery vehicles servicing these offices would typically be able to fit in a regular parking space. Looking at waste management, the applicant is proposing to use individual roll carts for trash collection. They did have conversations with Dare County in that regard, and the sanitation department within Public Works did agree that that was an acceptable method of trash collection. Regarding signage, the applicants are proposing a single freestanding sign on the site plan located near the northern drive. For the record, they would potentially be allowed to have a sign on each property. They are separate properties, so should the business owners someday choose, they could have a sign on each, a freestanding sign on each property if they chose. Dare County Health Department has issued an improvement permit noting that each of these 3 parcels is suitable for a septic system to accommodate the proposed building and uses. There would be a separate permit required for a construction permit, as they call it, if the development is approved and they get to that phase. And then the planning board also reviewed the land use plan, our town's adopted CAMA land use plan. And in the plan, on the future land use map, it notes that the northernmost property in this proposed development, Lot 3, is designated as a commercial shopping and working area. Curiously, the other 2 lots, that was actually the dividing line. The other 2 lots to the south were designated as a lower density residential area. As the properties are already zoned MS1, that in some ways it's sort of a moot point. They're already zoned commercially or for that type of medical office use. But we did want to point that out as something the board did look at. In the staff report, there are a variety of conditional use findings. Councilwoman Klutz had mentioned previously, so I suspect we can talk about those if there are any changes or additions the council would like to make to those. But I won't go over those specifically. But we'll point out, we'll conclude with the planning board's recommendation. At their meeting on October 16th, the board voted unanimously to recommend approval of the proposed conditional use permit for the establishment of medical offices and a veterinary clinic, subject to the following conditions, and for the record, I will read those. First, the associated text amendment allowing veterinary hospitals and clinics as a conditional use in the MS1 district must be approved in order to permit the proposed veterinary clinic. Obviously, that has occurred earlier this evening. Secondly, information about how solid waste will be managed needs to be provided. Solution noted on the project narrative reflected on the site plan. As mentioned earlier, the applicant has followed up on that and determined that the roll carts would be the solution there, so that has also been addressed. Then, everyone following are things that have not been addressed. 3, a construction permit for each septic system must be obtained from the Dare County Environmental Health Department prior to issuance of a building permit for each building. 4, an encroachment permit must be obtained from NCDOT for the proposed access drives, water line extension, and other features within the rights-of-way for North Croatan Highway prior to issuance of a building permit. Number 5, a stormwater management permit must be obtained from the North Carolina Division of Energy, Minerals, and Land Resources prior to issuance of a building permit. Number 6, North Carolina Division of Public Water Supply and the Dare County Water Department must permit and approve installation of the proposed water lines and fire hydrant prior to issuance of a building permit. 7, an erosion and sediment control permit must be obtained from the town of Kitty Hawk prior to issuance of a building permit. Number 8, a separate sign permit must be obtained for all signs to be erected on the site. Number 9, all exterior site lighting must be included in the calculations for a final lighting plan to be approved prior to the issuance of a building permit. Number 10, as recommended by the board, the applicant must construct an interparcel connection to the property line, or at least provide access easements to the parcels to the north and south of the subject property along North Croatan Highway. Number 11, easements must be recorded to ensure that the shared access, parking, and stormwater improvements will be maintained among the 3 properties. And lastly, number 12, an as-built survey of the subject properties, height certification for each building, an elevation certificate for each building must be submitted and approved prior to the issuance of a final certificate of occupancy. I did want to note that upon receiving the revised site plan from the applicant following the comments from the planning board, the site plan that you have before you this evening, there was a condition number 10, which was the one regarding the interparcel connection or easements. As I mentioned previously, the applicant did address that through providing access easements to the parcels to the north and south. So at this point, rather than negating that condition number 10, what staff is recommending at this point is that that be changed to say that the easements connecting the parking area with the adjoining parcels to the north and south must be recorded prior to the issuance of a building permit. So that was just sort of a follow-up to the requirement, since the applicant did agree and complied with that, with the board's condition by providing the easement. That concludes my report, but certainly be glad to answer any questions the council has or talk through any proposed changes.
Joe, do we know since the October 16th planning board meeting if the applicant or anyone has been in contact with NCDOT regarding the driveways to see if they would approve these, if they're considered to be safe ingress and egress off of US 158.
The applicant is prepared to speak to that. He has had conversations with NCDOT. I can't tell you when those occurred, but the applicant's engineer is present and can respond to that and tell you what he's talked with them about.
Okay.
And I just have that question about, do we have to change this to the emergency and government services as part of the findings?
And Councilwoman Klutz, you were talking about finding under letter D, is that
yes,
correct?
uh-huh.
And in other words, rather than saying commercially zoned properties, you would want to substitute the name of the district instead of commercially?
Either that or just leave it as a district, but I don't know which would be required, actually, to be more specific probably would be better.
Yeah, it would be more specific than just the general term commercial. The council's certainly welcome to make that change when, in talking about your findings during the motion.
Is that MS1 district actually considered a commercial district?
It is. It's not a full-blown where it allows everything that a BC, or that our BC districts do, but it does allow a variety of commercial uses of a lesser scale. So, I mean, the term's correct, but you're right that it is a more general term. And if you'd prefer, we can, that change can be made.
Only if it's necessary. That's the only thing I wanted to know. If it's necessary to change it, I say change it. If not, just leave it the way it is.
Mr. Michael, did you see a
I
concern
think
with
the
that?
change is fine to make it the MS1
To
district.
make the change? Okay.
Before I ask anybody else, and I do have some questions, so don't go away. Craig had a question that needs to be addressed while we're in this part of the public hearing. We haven't even heard from the public yet.
Right.
But we need to ask all our questions now and make the decision after we get out of that. So would the engineer step up and answer Craig's question about the NCDOT?
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put a reduced version of the plan up on the screen. That would be a little bit more helpful in looking at the overall plan itself. To address the question, there's been two subsequent conversations with the North Carolina Department of Transportation regarding this application. There's been one that has been discussed with Brent Bass with the Elizabeth City NCDOT department, and basically he has reviewed this plan and given a preliminary approval on that. And then there was a subsequent conversation that had taken place with Jerry Jennings, the division engineer, to review this application, and he had given his verbal approval to this. One of the things in planning of this proposed development was the critical nature of ingress and egress and access to this site, especially from the north, noting that there is a horizontal curve which may limit visibility for access to this site. When this was planned, we looked at the northern entrance and put an abbreviated deceleration lane on there in order to accommodate easier access into the site. Also, you'll note that there's a right-hand turn only out at this location. Again, just wanting to limit the amount of vehicles in and out of this point of access. There is also a southern point of access, and note that we tried to expand the distance between the northern and southern access as much as possible in order to allow that distance to be basically expanded as much as possible from that horizontal curve in order to limit the potential for any vehicle conflicts and maximize the visibility for that southbound traffic from the north. In addition to that, there's also a separate point of ingress and egress, as Mr. Hurd had indicated, off of Putter Lane. Just wanted to go ahead and maximize access to this site, as well as the ease of internal traffic circulation within the interior of the site. In addition to that, there's also been provisions made for the interparcel connections here at this point and here at this point. This, as Mr. Hurd had pointed out, this is recommended within the land use plan. It's not a requirement, but it's something that we thought was important, and we are complying with that. There are other provisions within this application that there have been some recommendations, and we have complied in every aspect. During our feasibility study, one of the concerns was fire flow to this location. And you'll note that as it stands right now, there's a 6-inch water line that terminates up here to the north, which we are going to extend and provide a hydrant here at the corner of Lot 3. This is to go ahead and get us within 400 feet, the distance required by the North Carolina Fire Code in order to provide fire access to each one of those buildings. There's also a secondary means that's existing back here off of Putter Lane, so we've got 2 means of access to fire flow in the case of an emergency. In addition, we had contact with the Dare County Water Department about the provision of the potential for the extension of this water line south and then an easement for a connection to that existing water line to provide a loop connection. This may potentially improve water flow in this area, as well as water pressure and water quality. So we saw the need to go ahead and look at not only the immediate and short-term needs of this project, but also the long-term and future needs that this project could serve and the potential benefits for that. There's been other challenges that we have faced with this project, one being the undulating topography of the site. We've got elevations as high as 22 feet above mean sea level and as low as 12 feet above mean sea level. So there's a lot of undulation to this site, and the grading is critical. One of the things that you'll note is that we did not bring these access easements, or we provided the access easements, but we did not provide the physical driveway surface all the way to the property lines, and that was due to the topography. If we were to do that, then we would be encroaching on not only the town property here at this point, but also the adjoining undeveloped property to the north. So in order to go ahead and make it cleaner, we went ahead and provided access easements up to that property line. So should those sites be developed in the future, we would have the means for that inter-parcel connectivity. There is also challenges with the wastewater and serving not only the medical use, but also the veterinary use. There are specific guidelines within the wastewater rules that specifically govern the design of those systems, and we will go through that process prior to the issuance of a building permit. And likewise for stormwater management, as Mr. Hurd had indicated, there's the state requirement for approval of the stormwater management facilities for this application. Some of the other unique aspects that Mr. Hurd had pointed out was also the shared facilities on this site, that being the access and parking. Based upon the use, it generates a lot of parking spaces. So the most efficient plan in moving forward was to maximize the parking, and this was one way of doing it, was through shared facilities. Same thing with the stormwater management is, again, maximizing the efficiency and having shared facilities among the 3 separate buildings. And we are willing to go ahead and provide the necessary legal mechanisms in order for those facilities to be recorded in order to have shared use and maintenance of those facilities. So I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have pertaining to this application.
I have a couple. Can I start? All right. The plan that I'm looking at shows the veterinary office on the left, not the middle. Which is it?
It's on the left. That was pointed out in the review at the planning board stage. When the lot evaluations were performed by the Dare County Health Department, it was noted that Lot 5 was the specific use for the veterinary use. And that is now reflected on the updated plan, which is this plan that I have up here on the screen. As far as the layout of these lots, they could be interchangeable. So it's not critical that it's on Lot 5, that it could be interchangeable between lots 3, 4, or 5.
Okay, that's where I was going with the question. Even though you're showing it here, none of these, as I understand it, have an owner yet. And this is all proposed, so that veterinary office could go in any one of those three?
That is correct.
That's what I thought. In the proposed wording here, it says a vegetated or constructed visual buffer may, the word may, be required. Joe, who would determine whether that would be required from the town? Would it be the owner? Would it be neighbors? How does that work when you use the word may in a place like that?
And where are you referring to, sir?
I'm referring in your, we're in proposed conditional uses. Item number E. And I'm using the original one, that's what I've changed. Oh, okay, it's same place, okay. It says, basically it says, a vegetated or constructed visual buffer may be required. Why would it not be required? Let's ask the question that way.
Okay, and that was under the criteria that the council just approved related to the veterinary clinic.
Right.
Okay. If we look at the general standards for buffers found in the town's ordinance and when they would be applied, this project would not be subject to any buffer requirements. In other words, there's already a sufficient distance between this property and others that would not kick in a buffer requirement.
Because the 50-foot is basically a,
You have commercial zoning across the back of the property.
Right.
To the north, to the east, across the highway. And then you've got the only properties to the south would be the towns that are undeveloped.
all right. So in this case, council may or may not.
Under the conditional
that.
use for the veterinary service you have, and it gives you that option as part of
Okay.
the conditions for that use, though, should you see the need for it.
Okay. And back to the engineer. In the wording we were given, it says an additional water main will be extended approximately 100 feet, and you talked about that. But it does not, in the information we've got, state that the water main will be at least 6 inches. It could be something less than that. What is the water main size? Is 6 inches a standard that must be used in that case?
Yes, since we're putting a fire hydrant on the distal end of that, it must be 6 inches in diameter, so we're going to
Okay.
match what's existing.
I want to make sure that we're not downsizing, even though you're on,
No, sir.
okay. And then my final question goes to the back of the sheet where it says large vehicle pathing exhibit. Do you have that?
Yes, sir.
And it looks to me like, if I'm looking at this correctly, you're pushing large vehicle traffic off onto Putter Lane. Is that correct?
No, in some of the commentary provided by the town engineer, he had indicated that he would like to see the vehicle pathing, if large vehicles were able to access this site, how that would look within the interior of the site, and how that would match with the proposed radiuses that I had for the curbing. So this was an exhibit. So this was an exhibit to demonstrate that there was adequate radii on the curbing within the interior of the site in order to accommodate large vehicles, whether that be emergency vehicles such as fire trucks, whether that would be sanitation trucks, or any other type of similar vehicles. So it was just an exhibit in order to address the town engineer's comments.
Okay, so we're not trying to push heavy traffic onto Putter Lane, which is, we don't want to do that.
No, sir.
All right, everyone understand that? Okay. All right, anyone else have any questions of the engineer or Joe before I start calling for public hearing?
I think you had a couple of other folks that wanted to speak.
I do, and that's where I'm going next. All right, Lynn?
Bobby Wells.
Good evening, this is my first time to speak before you, so I don't know exactly the protocol to address you, but I'm a resident on Putter Lane. As you probably can imagine, I'm very concerned with this proposal. I'm concerned about property values. With this being constructed, I'm more concerned for the traffic on Putter Lane. It's already a small road, and I'd like to know if it's, I don't know if it's still private, if it's still a private road? That, is Kitty Hawk going to take over that as one of their roads if this happens? And I'm concerned about the waste. Again, it said that, the proposal said it's gonna be rollers, rolling things, but can it change over to dumpsters? Is that allowed? Is that going to be allowed? I'm concerned about, at the end of Putter Lane, there's a one-way stop sign that goes into Regional or Beach Centaura. So I'm a little bit confused of why Putter Lane narrows down and has a stop sign but is not permitting traffic from, or supposedly not permitting traffic from the Beach Medical. Although it happens, I mean, there's people flying down that street nonstop from Beach Medical. I have 2 young boys in elementary school, and I've, put out Watch for Children, that sort of thing. I've even bought orange cones to try to prevent the speeding that's going down. I called the police department. They said it's a private road. It's up to the a private lane. So it's up to the residents to post their own signs about children or to gather funds to create a speed bump or that sort of thing in the road. And my other concern is, again, the delivery trucks. Yes, it's not going to be the proposed route, but as we've seen with Beach Medical, we've got delivery trucks going up and down Putter Lane as it is. I'm concerned about the additional lighting outside as well. We're used to being able to go out and have a pleasant starry gaze at the sky, and to have the additional lighting at night, I think, distracts from the ambiance of why we purchased this property, to retire, to relax. And I just ask that the council, take into consideration, if this was your home or you were living near this area, how you would feel. That you've invested your money in a property and then this comes along.
I'd also like to know if the businesses can change. Can the businesses change in this proposal to different types of businesses? And what else? I'm also interested in what you brought up, Mayor, about the buffer. If it's appropriate, I'd like to know, why does Kitty Hawk own, or what is the position with Kitty Hawk's property on Putter Lane? Is that to create a nice park or something pleasant? Why does Kitty Hawk own that property?
Well, there are two things going on there. I will answer that. The property, one lot was originally purchased by the volunteer fire department before we had our own fire department. And they were planning to put a fire station there. The second lot was acquired because, are you on one of the triangular lots, the deep triangular lots?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Those lots, the town had a triangular piece in there, and in order to develop those, there was a trade. So we wound up with two lots. That's how those two lots came about. To answer your question on the width of Putter Lane, when that section was developed and the road was put in, it was widened to accommodate more traffic, but it stopped basically at the medical center because that wasn't a part of what was being done. So that's how it got wider in that particular part of Putter Lane. It's still private as far as I know. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. So it's still a private road. And your question about how this interacts with that private road, I'm going to ask the attorney here shortly. It's a valid question, and we want to know as well.
There's something else that popped up, but I'm sure
Sure.
my neighbor Tony will cover it. If I think of something else, can I step back up, or am I done once I leave?
well-
Otherwise, I'm going to camp out here.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Could you tell me where your home is relative to the,
I am on the other side of the Kitty Hawk property. I'm not the next house, which apparently is a rental property, right, Tony? It's a rental house.
Yes.
With, the owners aren't physically in that house, they rent that property.
so
So
you're,
I'm the next one next to them.
so you're south of the Kitty Hawk property with one lot in between?
That's
Okay.
correct.
The Kitty Hawk property, just to refresh my memory, is in MS1 district, correct?
No, Joe is saying no.
It's what is
No,
it
he said
in?
it was residential.
Residential?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if a
So
fire
we-
station was going to be built there, we'd have to do something
Right,
to do it.
okay.
Okay.
So we, as the owners of that residential property, are the decision authority on whether a buffer is required. Okay.
Steve, can you help us out on that? I'm really curious to know how that interacts too.
Putter Lane, Beach Medical,
Right.
I don't know.
No, what's proposed before us as far as these three lots. And if Putter Lane is a private road, then these three lots own half of that. Is that correct?
Access to it, correct.
Therefore, they have access to it.
Right.
Okay. Does that answer that question?
Does that mean that they're going to provide maintenance for that road as well?
Yes, they would have responsibility just like you have for that road. That's correct. Not the town. Right?
And just half of it?
And just half of it.
Just half of it. So
Correct.
who's got the other half? The lots on the other side?
I've never looked at those properties out there, so I'm not sure how it's set up.
The town.
And another question I have is, how tall can these facilities,
Not more than 35 feet.
is that not any taller than what the medical
Residential.
facilities are next to it?
Yeah. 35 feet is a town standard.
Standard.
All right. Okay?
Okay, if I have any other questions, am I allowed to come back or no?
We'll let you come back.
Okay.
Lynn?
Tony Cirillo.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. Bobby is a neighbor of mine. I live almost across the street from her on Putter Lane, and I have many of the same concerns and I don't even know if they're objections at this point, except they are concerns about many of the things she brought up. One of the things that struck me, though, in some of the earlier conversations here is, you've got a medical center with, I don't know, thousands of square feet, and people coming in and out, and every other thing, and you've got one egress and one ingress to the whole complex. Now you're proposing 3 little one-story buildings, I'm assuming, that are smaller than the house I live in, each one of them, okay? And you have this massive way to get in and out from the bypass. What purpose does it serve to have a road that connects these buildings to Putter Lane, which is a tiny little road? And as Bobby said, she has small children. I have grandchildren to visit every year. Our other neighbor has children that visit. There are no sidewalks. Those kids play on the street. They're up and down the street with bikes and all sorts of things. You're creating a situation here on Putter Lane with the potential for a lot of traffic with, at least in my judgment, no reason for it. You've got, a 30-foot entry on the south, and you've got a 30-foot entry on the north, with a lot easier way to get in and out of that than the existing medical center, which is closer to the curve in the road. So I guess my biggest concern over and above what Bobby's talking about is, why do you need access to Putter Lane? We just talked about the fact that you're going to have fire hydrants and access to emergency vehicles. I don't have a great problem with this proposal, except that one thing. Why complicate a nice little private street that has, very nice homes on it with the potential for more, by putting a egress or ingress to a small private street? You've got plenty of access from the bypass. You've only got, I forget the number, but you don't have much parking. You don't have as many buildings as the medical center, and that has one way, in and out. I mean, my property has an access from the front, not necessarily from the back. Why do you need it here? Can I come back to?
Thank you. All right, is anyone else signed up?
No, sir, that's all that is signed.
All right. Does anyone else want to come back?
I'd like this. I didn't sign up, but I'd like to.
You're always welcome to speak.
Yep. He hasn't been sworn.
You might want to.
Name is Jim Waddell, and I also,
Oh,
one of the questions, the buildings that are going to be proposed there, are they one story or are they more?
one story is Joe, do you know the answer to that? They're allowed to go to 35 feet, so it could be 2, but I don't know that these are proposed to be there. I have not seen an actual building. All we get to see is the lot configuration at this point.
That was a residential area, correct? I know when we purchased the lot on Putter Lane, I visited with Joe and Don, and they told me that area was residential. Now it's commercial.
This was changed to medical quite some time ago. So medical, in a sense, at one time there was thought that a hospital would go there. That obviously hasn't happened, so now something slightly different. But in the sense of residential that you're thinking, not in my tenure here, and certainly not before my tenure here. It was a medical facility and set aside to do that.
Well, the question I have is, riding around Kitty Hawk, which is a beautiful town, there are a lot of vacant buildings now. The market, there was going to be a farmer's market, that's still vacant. The other side of the street is a Mobile gas station, that's vacant. Why do we have to pick on a little small piece of property with residential homes? I mean, isn't there another part of Kitty Hawk that would be better suited for that?
Well, property owners do have rights, and that's what we're considering tonight. Just as we would consider your property as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A question for the attorney. Steve said the question about the access to Putter Lane, because you own the property, you have access to Putter Lane.
Well, I'm assuming they do, because I haven't done any title work on their property, but I'm assuming they have access to Putter Lane since their property bumps up against it back there. And I'm assuming they checked that when they designed it so that they would have access on the Putter Lane.
All right.
Can I have a question, Joe? Earlier, we heard that the access onto Putter Lane was to support the fire trucks and trash trucks. Can they be accommodated by using the ingress and egress onto 158? Is it absolutely necessary to have that connection to Putter Lane?
I can speak on behalf of the fire trucks. I know that was part of the original review of it, and no, there's no particular need for that for the fire trucks that I'm aware of from conversations we've had.
And if the drive lane supports the fire trucks sufficiently, wouldn't that kind of include the trash trucks? I don't see where they would be.
I don't know if they have any different requirements or not, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I guess we go into.
Well, the
discussion.
engineer is here, and the engineer did the plan, so let's ask the question. The owners have land that abuts Putter Lane. They, we're assuming here, have a right to access Putter Lane. And then the question before you is, the one objection that we're getting from the public is that they don't want Putter Lane accessed by heavy-duty trucks, things of that nature.
In speaking with Mr. Alexander from the fire department, when we went through the preliminary testing of the fire flow in the surrounding area, that unless there was access given to Putter Lane, then the flow from this hydrant could not be considered. The hydrant that is down, which is being proposed right here, and that's an extension of the existing 6-inch water line, that flow is only 1,100 gallons per minute. As per the fire code, it's required to have 1,500 gallons per minute. So it's additive. When you look at the fire flow from this hydrant from 158 and then the flow from the fire hydrant off of Putter Lane, that's additive. When you add those two, then you meet that 1,500 gallon per minute requirement. If you don't have access, then that other fire hydrant cannot be considered, and therefore there would be substantial costs that would be required in order to extend that water line along the frontage of the property and then take it down along the southern property line and to connect to the existing water line on Putter Lane. You would effectively be adding a factor of 6 to the cost of that proposed water line extension.
Okay, all right, thank you, that answers the question for me.
Can I ask the attorney a question? Can the access to Putter Lane be limited to the fire department's requirements?
I would think you probably cannot.
Probably not.
If this may help, you'll notice that I've got an arrow, and that's for just egress from Putter Lane. So primarily, we're trying to limit traffic, because this is a secondary access. You know, our main primary access is from 158, and we can indicate that as a one-way access from Putter Lane in order to reduce the amount of traffic onto Putter Lane from this site.
You're saying you could make it
One
one
way.
way from Putter Lane into there? Is that what you just
No,
said?
One way
from
going
this
out.
site out to Putter
Out to
Lane.
Putter Lane.
And that's what's indicated on the plan, and that's
Right.
what the intent was.
Okay. All right, any further questions here before I ask for the last public? All right. Anyone else wish to speak at this public hearing?
I would like to ask one more question.
Come up to the mic, please.
As we're speaking about access into or out of Petter Lane, is there a way that we could only have, have a partition where they can only go one direction, like to the right?
Which would put them going out,
Into regional medical parking lot,
Parking
Right.
lot.
and not letting them go left down Petter Lane, like, do you know what I'm talking about? Like a
Yeah.
Yeah,
triangle
but-
Yeah.
thing?
Is Putter Lane two-way now at that point?
I guess so.
I believe
I've
it
Yeah,
misunderstood
it is.
because
Yeah,
there's a
when it was
sign.
widened, it was made two-way at that point. Before that, it was one way in the other direction. All right,
Something happened.
all right, it's something for us to consider. All right?
Thank
Anyone else? Let the record show, no one else came forward. Do you hear a motion to go back in regular session?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? All right, hear a second? Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're back in regular session. What does council want to do? You want to take this up tonight, or wait until next, think about it a little bit?
I want to ask a question, of the attorney. She brought up something, so could you put a sign, no entrance, so no one could possibly go from the interior parking lot to go back to Putter Lane, but it would still be able to be used there for the fire department use?
Certainly, the developer can do that.
And we can make it a part of the conditions.
Emergency access or
Emergency
something
only.
of that.
Traffic only.
and-
Traffic only.
Yes.
And that way, I mean, I can understand
Yeah, absolutely.
her.
Can we, if they are willing to do that as a condition?
If they're willing to do that, you certainly can impose that condition. You can't ask them now.
Okay.
You've closed your public
No,
hearing.
we closed the public hearing. We either have to make a decision now, or we can wait and make the decision next month. If you want to make a decision now, I need to hear a motion.
I'd rather wait until next month to see if we can work out some of these issues that have been brought up tonight, which I think are very valid.
All right?
I agree.
All right, do we need a motion for that
You need a motion to continue it to a specific time and day.
time and date?
January's meeting.
You're blocking. All we have is 2014.
January the 5th.
The first would be on the same day as Christmas, so if you count forward, we could come up with the date.
What do you want to know? Which one?
How about the next regularly scheduled council meeting in the month of January? Is that good enough?
Yeah.
That would make it, that makes it for you, Lynn?
Where's the county?
All right, did you just make a motion?
Well, I would like to make a motion to.
All right.
I would like to move to consider this proposal at our next regularly scheduled meeting in January 2015, so that in the interim, we can address the concerns that have been brought up here by the residents on the access to Putter
Putter
Lane.
Lane.
Is that January the 5th? That's the
January the
first
5th.
Monday in January.
January the 5th.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Mayor.
All right, any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Does that mean we need to come back and restate what we restated?
No, it means we come back and make our decision based on all the information that's been put to us tonight and the consideration of property owner rights and neighbors' rights. And then we make a decision that makes some people happy and some not so happy. It's just the way it works. All right. Moving on. Next, we have a zoning amendment, and it's an application to rezone remaining portions of property. We still have a lot of people, so I guess that's why you were here. Do I hear a motion to go back into public hearing?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we are now in public hearing. And, Joe, give us some update.
Thank you, Mayor Perry, members of council. Next item we have is a proposal to rezone a portion of properties at 103 First Flight Run and 3732 North Croatan Highway from Beach Residential BR1 to Beach Commercial BC1. As you look at the map I've put up on the screen here, you'll see the two properties. They're both surrounded in the red. So the one property at 103 First Flight Run, presently the only access is off of First Flight Run, which is coming into the First Flight Ridge development right here. Yes, sir. That's the development. This is the rezone. Okay. The second property at 3732 North Croatan is the property that contains it was developed with Bank of Commonwealth, presently contains Outer Banks Blue. And what you'll see here is there's a small corner of that property that also appears to be bisected there by the zoning line. So there's just a tiny piece in there of that property. So that's what we're looking at as far as the rezoning. So you see all the area in blue that's presently commercial. The proposal would be to extend that blue over to the full boundary of these two properties. The first property that came up was an application from the owners of Barefoot Bernie's. The property's right here, fronting on Croatan Highway, have acquired this property here at 103 First Flight Run. During its review of this application, the planning board members was brought to their attention, and they noted the other little corner at 3732 and did ask that be included in their recommendation as far as what would be appropriate for rezoning. So that is included. Staff, following that meeting, did contact the property owner for that property, and we actually have in our hands a rezoning application from that property owner as well. So that's why that has been included. So the lot at 103 First Flight Run was created with the First Flight Ridge subdivision in 2004. At the time it was created, the zoning boundary line runs just like you see it today, in a straight line parallel to Croatan Highway. When these lots were created, as you know, First Flight Ridge is certainly predominantly, there are some commercial things up front, but predominantly a single-family residential neighborhood. And this lot was created facing in to the development in that area. This is the first lot on the left, just after you go through the gate at the front of the development. So what happened is that when these lot lines were created, it didn't follow the zoning line. And there's no requirement that it has to, but it didn't, and so that's how the town ended up with a split zone property in these particular circumstances. Also created at the time was this larger parcel up at the front at 3732 North Croatan Highway. In this case, you've got a property that we're estimating off of some numbers, but 97% zoned commercially, just this little corner. that's not, but zoned in the BR1 district. Property was developed with the 3-story Bank of Commonwealth building in 2007. At that time, all of the development and all of the existing development on the property is contained within the commercially zoned property. So there is no commercial use or development within the residential piece. So the intent of this was, when the planning board looked at it, was simply to make a clean boundary rather than having a notch of residential zoning should this other piece be rezoned, if that is what the council wishes to do. The board felt there was benefit to the owners and the town in making that a clean boundary, incorporating that little corner in there as well. Town of Kitty Hawk's adopted land use plan designates both of the properties partially as a commercial shopping and working area, partially as a low-density residential area, consistent with the existing zoning. In other words, that recommendation appears to follow the existing zoning line through the properties. After looking at the situation at their meeting on October the 16th, the planning board voted unanimously to recommend approval to rezone the remaining portions of both of these properties to the Beach Commercial 1 district. And I'd certainly be glad to answer any questions that the council members would have.
Anyone have a question of Joe? Do we need to have people sworn for this one? Not this one. I'll never figure that out, you know that. All right. Lynn, anyone signed up at this particular hearing?
Well, Mr. Spencer did, but he's spoke during public comment.
All right. Now, actually, here, your comments were more germane to what's coming next, weren't they?
They were. I thought I might leave early, Mr. Mayor.
Well, we all try, but tonight we don't get there. All right, but it's important to hear from the people, so we do our best. All right, anyone want to speak at this rezoning hearing? Let the record show, no one came forward. Do I hear a motion to go back in regular session?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we're back in regular session. What does council want to do?
I make a motion.
All right,
I move to grant approval of this application to rezone the remaining portions of the properties at 103 First Light Run and 3732 North Croton Highway from Beach Residential BR1 to Beach Commercial BC1.
do I hear a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, it's rezoned. Well, planning, site plan review. We have an application for approval of a site plan proposing to relocate an existing septic system and do some expansion. Joe?
They get sworn for this one.
I'm sorry?
They have to be sworn for this one.
You do need to explain that to me sometime.
I'm sorry, this is a site plan, this
Yeah, this is
not.
the
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Sorry.
come on now.
I'm getting confused now.
You've been here too long too, haven't you?
I think it's how the wind blows, it's just,
All right, Joe, you're up. I'm gonna watch it up there, this is not easy.
All right.
Yeah.
That's what killed me.
Thank you, Mayor Perry, members of council. In a related matter, you have before you a proposal site plan review for parking expansion and relocation of septic system. at Barefoot Bernie's, 3730 North Croatan Highway. Under this proposal, the expansion would add 28 new paved parking spaces in the area of the existing septic system located to the west of the restaurant. Looking at the arrow here, this would be this, it's a shaded area on your site plans. But it'd be this area to the west of the restaurant, kind of behind it, the existing building. And then a new septic system would be located on the newly acquired property to the northwest, the property we were just dealing with regarding the rezoning. You can see at least the potential layout of that setting here. These would be the proposed septic lines, and then the remaining area is there as a potential area, should damage occur to this would be your area here for, where they could be relocated should that occur. So the key changes here are the development within this rear parking area and the septic system. Presently, the subject property is 3 different parcels of land. There is actually, curiously enough, in looking at it, there's a lot line that runs through the existing building over and then jags off to the side that was never formally combined. And then you have this separate third parcel back here. As part of the proposal, the applicants would seek to combine these 3 parcels of land. So they would be getting rid of an existing non-conforming situation where the building sits over that line. And then they would also be adding in this third property here. So all 3 parcels that are part of the development would become a single parcel. The existing restaurant's a little over 5,000 square feet in size. There is not, now I do want to be clear, there's not an expansion of the restaurant being proposed as part of this. Again, the improvements are limited to the site improvements of the septic and parking. Very similar to a project that council reviewed a year or so ago for Hurricane Mose, if you recall. With the rezoning that just occurred, the property is now in its entirety zoned Beach Commercial 1. And I just wanted to highlight a few aspects of the project for the council, but certainly be glad to answer any questions about any aspect of the project you might have. The subject property currently contains 43 marked parking spaces. With the size of the restaurant presently, there would be a minimum requirement of 51 parking spaces under the current standards. So it is a non-conforming situation right now. The proposed project, however, there would be adding 28 new parking spaces, but there would be a loss of a handful of spaces as a new driveway is put in. So as a net, there would be 24 new parking spaces added net. And with that in mind, the total number of spaces would be brought up to 67 parking spaces for the site, which would be significantly more than the requirement. So it would be bringing the site into conformity with the parking standards that the town has. By increasing the number of spaces, actually the magic number that triggers it is 51, but by increasing the number of spaces to 67, it does create a need for a third ADA accessible parking space. The applicants have proposed to establish this space over on the south side of the drive aisle, all the way on the eastern side of the lot. So up in this front, if you're looking at the property from the highway, it would be the front left corner. Up in that area is where they propose to put it. There is a striped in order to kind of make people aware of that and keep people in a safer manner. There would be a striped access way provided that goes across the drive aisle and over toward the entrance to the restaurant. Part of the project that is, I guess we'll call it a side benefit of this, presently Barefoot Bernie's has a dumpster location toward the rear of their parking lot that you can see as you pull in and drive into the parking lot. That is proposed as part of this project to be moved over here to the northern side, behind the restaurant, so certainly much better shielded and buffered in that location. And then it would be accessed by trucks coming through the new parking area in the manner I'm showing here on the screen. There is a buffer requirement, and now that buffer, as what you see on the site plan is the applicant's engineer showing where that buffer was located prior to the council's decision to rezone this property. So you can see this was the thicker dashed lines were the zoning lines. The buffer, the thinner dashed lines, would be 50 feet over. Now that zoning line, now that it jags over and does this, the buffer does something similar. So it comes over and it follows along in this direction and then cuts down to the south. The key thing to remember about the buffer in this case is that the buffer prevents buildings, structures, parking. However, it allows, it would even allow an access drive in that buffer area, but it definitely allows underground improvements such as the proposed septic lines. So even though this property, in particular the newer property that's being added here, the 103 First Flight Run property, is here, even though the buffer would extend onto that property for 50 feet, it doesn't matter because the only improvements being put on that property are underground septic lines. So those are not subject to the buffer. So there would be nothing that, they would be within the buffer, but the property owners, the adjoining owners and such who would be protected by that buffer, there's no building or parking or things like that in there. It's just the underground septic lines. Stormwater management, you do have as part of the proposal, you have a basin running along here. To be very honest, the engineer has actually improved, as part of this, once this is constructed, will improve the existing stormwater drainage on the property in addition to accommodating any of the additional stormwater management needs brought on by the expansion of the parking area. Town engineering consultant Joe Anloff has reviewed the stormwater management plan, and he did find it to be in compliance with the town's standards. So their meeting on November the 13th, the planning board voted unanimously to recommend approval of this site plan. The board did recommend the following conditions for the council's consideration. First, that the 3 parcels be combined into a single parcel prior to initiating construction of the proposed improvements. Second, as it was stated by the board, that if the property at 103 First Flight Run is rezoned entirely to the Beach Commercial 1 zoning district, a revised site plan showing the new zoning boundary and buffer line must be submitted to the Planning and Inspections Department. Third, the applicant must obtain a permit for the proposed septic system from Dare County Environmental Health Department prior to initiating the construction of the proposed improvements. And fourth, the applicant must obtain an erosion and sediment control permit from the Planning and Inspections Department prior to initiating any clearing or grading activities. And that's all I have for you this evening, Mayor.
Just for clarification for public that may not be seeing what we're seeing, a buffer, normally people think a buffer might mean a fence or vegetation, but a buffer can be an open space, which is what would happen here.
It can be.
Because you'd have it underground, but you wouldn't necessarily be planting things. They could put a fence, but it doesn't necessarily mean a fence has to be put there when you say buffer.
That's correct.
All right. Just want to make sure we clarified that. Anybody got a question for him?
Well, I'd like to ask the attorney, well, I just don't understand what was said during the public comment period regarding this, and is it appropriate to ask a question about that?
It is, and what they're telling you, or what I understand Mr. Spence said, they're private covenants that affect this piece of property. And even though you have rezoned it, and you may approve this, until they resolve this issue between the parties, this is not going to happen.
Okay, so the fact that we rezoned it, these private covenants kind of trump our rezoning?
They trump your rezoning.
And based on what you just said, even if we accept this site plan, the covenants trump that also.
Trump that also.
Okay, as long as we understand that.
And I haven't read their covenants, but that's what I take from what Mr. Spencer has said, and I think that's probably.
And given the complexity of what's been presented to us as a site plan, it does not require a public hearing.
No.
Okay, so public input is not a part of what we're doing tonight.
This is just a
I
site plan.
see people out there, and I
approval.
want to make sure everybody's clear that
Right.
we're not jumping a hoop here, but we're just following process. Okay.
So we don't have anything to do with what will resolve this. This is strictly between
That's
those
between
two
them.
attorneys.
If you approve this site plan, then they're going to have to
Then
find
they
a way
have
to
to
resolve
figure
it.
something.
Mr. Spencer and Mr. Merrill can address it much better than I can.
Yeah.
Right now, they're sitting together, maybe later.
We get along fine, we don't always agree.
Yeah.
But
Please come up to the mic.
it is an issue of the developer's restrictive covenants. When First Flight Ridge was created, the developer made this entire subdivision subject to certain restrictions. Most pertinent of which in this case is that these lots, interior lots in First Flight Ridge, were to be restricted to residential use. There will be some challenges in the process of, Mr. Merrill is going to ask the community to amend the restrictive covenants to allow, in this specific case, this specific use. Whether that occurs, I don't know. But as it stands right now, this proposed use violates the restrictive covenants in our view.
Okay. So we can go ahead and do what we're going to do, and it won't really have any impact on this, except if they resolve it, and if we approve it, then they could go forward
Then they
with
could
what
go
they want to
forward.
do. Okay.
All right, any other questions? Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to grant approval of this site plan for the expansion of the parking area for Barefoot Bernie's Restaurant at 3730 North Croatan Highway, subject to the conditions recommended by the planning board.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, let the lawyers hash it out.
Yeah.
Finally, we're in new business, and we got two of that out of the way. So we have a police taser grant, and let me just state, so the public knows what we're doing. It didn't get on the consent agenda. The police department was approved for a Governor's Crime Commission grant in the amount of $12,308.25 to obtain new tasers. And if I understood it right, one of those folks that were up there before us is going to train everybody how to use them. They're for the patrol division. The current tasers in use are outdated and have exceeded their life expectancy. This is a 25% match grant, and we will submit $3,076.95 as our portion of the grant. So, council, we're going to spend a little money, but it's in the budget according to the manager. What do you want to do? Do I hear a motion to approve it?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Taser's coming. Steve, you got any comments?
Not a one.
All right. And we got, the town manager is out of town, so that's the reason he's not here. So we're going straight into town council.
I
Jeff?
don't have anything.
Craig?
Happy to be here, sir.
I got one, I'll try to keep it really brief. I have received probably at least exactly three calls. People that were asking about temporary signs. Two of them were not happy that the signs were, they thought, in the right of way. The one I'm referring to one was for the cottage chick. There's also now one up in front of where the crab house is, and there's also one where the new restaurant 252 is up there. I don't know if we're opening the door. The other call come asking me, could they put a sign up? So we have three. My concern is that eventually we're going to have the whole length of Kitty Hawk with a temporary freestanding 48-square-foot sign. And according to Ben, you can put it up for 30 days and then come at the end of that 30 days and get another extension for another 30 days. So you can have a 60-day sign up, according to the attorney's interpretation, is what I've been told.
Days, actually.
Huh?
It's 50 and 50.
That's even worse. So, I mean, I want to see what y'all think about it. I was just bringing it to your attention that I have had calls, and I'm sure that you probably will get some calls.
I remember us approving that 50 and 50.
Well, when, I would tell you this,
I thought they were banners, like temporary banners.
But see, now listen, when I was on the planet, this is 12, 15 years ago, we approved a 48-square-foot sign to be attached to the building for 30 to 60 days at a time, and for promotions and so forth, not to be put in the ground in the right-of-way. I have an issue with that.
Well, there were two, actually, there were two. There was temporary signs and temporary banners, and I believe it was the planning department that came up with the idea that they should combine those two things into one. And at the time, I didn't like it because you had two different ways of putting a temporary sign out, and people that wanted to put something out temporarily were, and then they didn't have the same access to doing that. And then some people came in because they just needed to promote something for like the summer season, and it was a charitable thing, and they were being hindered by the change to the ordinance. And so that's when we extended the time. So we've dealt with this not too long. I remember doing it, but I don't know how far back it was. And that's really what created the problem, if it's a problem.
All right, well, here's the question.
Here we are.
Here's the question before us. It's become a problem. I noticed it and spoke with Ben Alexander and got the same answer that you did, basically. And I noticed a proliferation of things that, for one thing, a banner to me is something different than what we're seeing out there. So the question before council is, do we want to direct the planning department to start looking at revising that in a different manner, a little more restrictive, have a little better control over it? And if we do, then we can do that tonight by making that direction known, and they can start working with that through the planning board. And we can provide our input to what it is we think needs to be done, and then we'll have a public hearing to decide where we go with that. Is that what council wants?
I would certainly like to see that done.
Yes, sir.
I agree.
You agree with that? All right. New planner? You got your marching orders, all right? All right. And I recommend that you converse with individual council members to kind of get a feel for where you're going and what's happened. Ian's got some history, and certainly Irvin has a good amount of history, and that'll give you some go. Ian? I have nothing. Motion to adjourn? Oh,
Public
whoa,
comment.
I'm sorry, wait a minute. Public comment.
Nobody?
All right. I guess now that I'm officially a member of the public instead. And I apologize, I really would have liked to have had a whole lot more people here with that last exodus occurred, I realized. It just didn't feel appropriate to do this during a public hearing, so when I got up the first time, but I was asked to welcome our new Director of Planning and Inspections, Rob Testerman. Those of you, I think everybody was kind enough to shake hands at least beforehand and introduce yourselves. But they've written me out a script here. Rob is a native of Chesapeake, graduated from Virginia Tech with a bachelor's degree in public and urban affairs, concentrating in urbanization, planning, and policy with a minor in industrial design. He spent the last 7 years working on the eastern shore of Virginia for Accomack County in the town of Cape Charles. He does hold an AICP designation, the highest thing a planner can get professionally, and is also in Virginia was certified in erosion and sediment control. So they'll continue that here as well. He will be relocating to the area this weekend, is my understanding, and residing just down the road in Kill Devil Hills. So I certainly wanted to welcome him, and hopefully everyone in the community can do the same and make his life a little easier as he does this big transition.
And before you go, Joe, and welcome. We do welcome you. Thank you for what you've done for the town. Appreciate the service you've give us. Hated to see you move up to Duck, but I guess that's a move up, but a longer drive for you. Best of luck to you, bud.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
All right. Public comment. Your last chance. We're going home. Let the record show, no one came forward. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? So moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?